it feels like in this adoption story, like more so than ever, I've never really encountered anything that's 100% emotional. Like there's nothing rational about what we're doing in my mind, you know, because I have no connection to these people, but I have an absolute unbreakable bond with them.
From a homestyle podcast studio far from the Mamamia offices deep inside a cupboard, I'm Mia Friedman and you're listening to No Filter. This is the second part of a special No Filter episode about Anne and Andrew, a woman who wasn't ready to be a mother at age 22 and the baby she gave up so that he could have a better life than the one that she could offer him at the time. In the first part of the episode, which you can find in your feed, we heard Anne's story, how she decided to adopt out her baby and how she felt about it and about him over the next 38 years until they saw one another again. Today, we hear from Andrew about what his life was like and what made him decide to embark on a worldwide search for his birth mother. I'd heard so much about Andrew from his new sisters, Jessie and Clare Stevens, who both work here at Mamamia, and I'd been deeply moved by what they'd told me. But it wasn't until this interview when I met Andrew over Skype late one night in Australia, early in the morning for him in Rhode Island, both of us in lockdown in different parts of the world, that this story became real. Adoption reunions don't always end well. Not everyone finds what or who they were looking for. But this is a story that will lift your heart because it is so infused with sensitivity and compassion and a generosity of spirit that is very clearly hereditary. Here's Andrew. I'm going to start at the beginning. When did you find out you were adopted?
So it's funny, I get asked this all the time because I'm not shy about talking about my adoption, so everyone knows. And the stock answer I give, which I checked in with my parents yesterday about, is that I never knew a time when I didn't know. I grew up, there was no sit-down moment where my parents kind of revealed to me that I was adopted. I have an older sister who's adopted from a different set of biological parents. So she's 4 years older than me, and she was 2 when she was adopted by my parents. And then I was adopted at birth, and then they have a biological child. So it's kind of, as we were growing up, kind of something that everyone remembers coming up at some point or another. Kids in the street, my sister must have said something, you know, oh, this is my brother, that where did you get a brother from, you know? And then she would say adopted, but like not know what it meant. And then my parents just always kind of trusted us, you know, and were open and honest. So they would just say, you know, you might not have been in mommy's tummy, but, you know, you're our son or whatever. So the concept of adoption was never foreign to me. So I never knew a moment when I didn't know, which made it really good.
Did you always know that when you turned 18, you would be able to find her? How does the process actually work?
Yeah. So my parents told me that at 18, so the way the process, they told me at 18 that I could find them. And the way the process works is that at 18, you can lodge a contact veto, and they kind of act like a buffer. So if I contact the adoption agency and I say I want to find out information about my biological parents, and my biological parents have lodged contact vetoes, it's a wall that blocks me from getting information about them. If no barrier is put up, no contact vetoes put up, then there's a reunion information registry that you're supposed to, it's like a repository for information that I believe was supposed to function in the way that, like, if Anne or Darren wanted to like put photos up there or write letters over the years or something, when I contact the adoption agency, they then have the authority to send me that information. In our case, that didn't work.
How come?
Because I don't know. I found out when I got in touch with Anne that Darren had reached out to her when I turned 18, like virtually on my 18th birthday, and they hadn't spoken in years, and said to her, you know, he's turned 18. What do you want to do? Hearing that from me, I was like, not knowing that they'd even kind of contemplated my existence throughout these years, you know, was really touching, was kind of amazing. But
did you really think that they hadn't thought about you?
Well, more so my biological father, because all the information that I got it was devoid of anything related to him. So, and I think a little bit it was overwhelming for me to think about two parents. I was able to think about a connection with my mother, I think maybe for natural reasons, My biological father, I kind of created this narrative that I knew he wasn't there when I was born. And I didn't think that he was a bad person. I just thought he wasn't involved in this at all.
Sure.
So I thought most likely he's gone off and lived his life, and that's it. Because he didn't go through the pregnancy and he wasn't there. Whereas I don't know how you wouldn't have thought about a child if you had to actually have the child, right? So I thought of it from Anne's perspective a lot more. Darren reached out to Anne for that exact reason and said, is your information up to date with the agency? And then they contacted the agency and they tried. And at this point, it's been revealed, because we now have connected, that whatever efforts they made didn't result in information getting to me. Because we think when I contacted them in 2010 and said, I would like as much information as possible, someone should have told me, oh, at that point, it's 12 years ago, they contacted us and gave updated information, phone numbers and addresses. Here it is. And no one did.
Oh, wow.
And we don't know where that fell apart.
So it was like misconnections.
Yeah. So the point I contact the adoption agency, it's possible that information could come to me. So I'm thinking, I didn't lodge a veto and they didn't. So I might get this, literally a roadmap to how to connect with them. And I didn't. And I just assumed, well, that's the way, they've done what I did. I waited 12 years too. So they've kind of sat back and thought the ball's in his court. But in fact, they'd actually been much more proactive about that, which I won't know until 2018 when I connect with Anne.
Why did you wait 12 years after you turned 18?
I grew up thinking on my 18th birthday, I was going to get like a big stick with a handkerchief on the end of it. And I was going to like hit the road and I was going to find them, like I had this big adventure kind of plan. And then at 18, like you're kind of nowhere, like I was graduating from high school and I started having this unrealistic expectation that I needed to be in some place, which I know now is an impossible task, to kind of like package myself and be prepared to present myself. Like I needed to be a millionaire and like, dress great and look amazing and then be like, here I am. And
so you wanted them to be proud of you?
Yeah, definitely.
And you felt that you had to achieve things for them to be proud of you?
Yeah. And so, at the point where you kind of very reasonably and understandably haven't done anything, you're just about to begin doing things. I kept kind of faltering at that step, and whether I consciously knew it or not, stopping from going any further than kind of wondering or talking about it. I then kind of so I went to college and I began to have all of these like identity. I was always like too much of a ponderer. I began to get a little wrapped up in that, like, who am I? Identity questions in the context of, well, one day I want to be at this fictitious place to present myself to my biological parents. And I can look back on that now and know that that was impossible. It's much more a state of mind and much more an emotional maturity that's required than necessarily, being Bill Gates or
Kanye.
Yeah, exactly. So I kind of started making life decisions on the basis that like I had to create world peace and solve all of the world's problems and stuff. And I wasn't getting there, like for some reason, I don't know what it was. It was just, it wasn't panning out. I was not Kofi Annan and I was not
Barack
yet
Obama.
on the Security Council.
That's right.
Yeah. And no one was there, presenting me with the opportunity to be those people. So I got frustrated. So I wavered a lot through college and I struggled to find my way. And then I decided to go to law school. I got into law school and I went to law school. And again, it becomes incredibly difficult and it's very stressful. And I start thinking, wow, who am I trying to impress? Like my parents are pretty proud of me. I want them to be proud of me too. And they're very successful. And I'm sure that, being a lawyer will be something that they will be proud of too. But like, I start thinking, am I getting anything? Like, there's more here. Why am I doing this if I'm not enjoying any of it? And so I got 2 years into law school, and this whole time, like in the back of my mind, I know that I'm struggling with my identity as an adopted person.
Had you met your wife, Lisa, by now?
Yeah. So we met we were in first year law school together, and she'll like to tell you that she didn't really want anything to do with me. We were friends, but I was not a viable candidate for her. And that's understandable because I was in this tumultuous time, and I had a floppy haircut and, and we kind of started a friendship. And then I went through, that time, and I took a semester off school. And when I returned to school, I was in a better place, and we kind of went and converted friendship into something a little bit more. So it's shortly after the two things really coincided when I, was prepared to start reaching out to find out about my biological parents, and when we started dating through law school.
I'm imagining like that scene in Lion where he's in a room and like there's diagrams and printouts all over the walls and he's trying to track down his biological parents. Was it a little bit like that? Was it like difficult, and were there lots of moving pieces? Where did you even start?
So in order to kind of try to avoid that and also be kind to myself, considering I was kind of coming out of like a fragile stage, I thought, okay, I'll take this one step at a time. I assumed they were in Australia. So there was a built-in delay in communication. Each time I wanted to fill out a form for, a government agency, which required like 6 types of, ID and notarization and original documents and all that, I'd have to mail it to them. Old school. And so I'd put it in the mail, and then I'd know I've got like 2 to 4 weeks before I hear anything. So there was like a total built-in delay. So the information kind of trickled in piece by piece. I would wait until I would get each new piece of information, and then I'd review it, and then I'd find it didn't really get me any closer because it would include like Anne's maiden name, which she doesn't go by anymore. So I got her maiden name, Coffee, and, some things were revealed in those documents. Like I had my original birth certificate, typically with me, very cerebral. It's just kind of up in my head. And then every now and then Lisa would be like, so are we going to do something with this information? Like, what do we do now? So I also had a counselor at the Catholic Care Adoption Agency who was kind of there to help guide through the process. And I suppose I led it in the sense that I said, like, I'm in no rush, let's take our time. And so she took her cues from me. As time went by and I felt like we were getting closer and closer, and I got a marriage certificate that showed Anne's last name. At that point, Lisa and I had found her on Facebook, so we knew, but we didn't have confirmation it was actually her. We would have no way of knowing. And my whole issue with connection was that I had written a letter and I had given it to the adoption agency and said, if you find her or you find someone, this is it. And in the letter I had said, if this is the only connection we ever have, then I get that. Because the amount of things that I might not know about you and your life is, innumerable. So how could I imagine to just step up? My biggest fear was showing up on their doorstep, either like literally or nowadays, even, sending a message on Facebook's the equivalent of knocking on someone's door, So because I don't know, maybe her husband looks at her Facebook page or Messenger or something and doesn't know about me, and that's fine. Like, she does that. She has no obligation to tell anyone, and I just don't want to turn her life upside down.
That's very considerate of you. I mean, it's interesting. Anne describes that letter as she straight away picked that maybe you were a lawyer or that you'd had almost legal advice in writing it, because she said it was worded incredibly considerately and very carefully.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've been writing that letter for years.
It struck me when she sort of described it a little bit to me that there was also a bit of a protective instinct in how you wrote it, because the fear of rejection must have been inside that letter too.
Yes, like the worst fear I had was that they wouldn't reciprocate, and my worst fear was exactly what I wrote in the letter, which was, if this is the only contact we have, I said, that's okay. Yeah. But in my heart, I'm like, if this is the only contact we have, that's going to break my heart, like that's not what I want.
Do you remember the day that you found her on Facebook?
Yeah. Because Lisa did the sleuthing, and she had, looked through everything, and she showed me. And the thing that kind of blew me away the most, well, the first thing that she had is a little haiku that she has on her Facebook page that's about, like, it says that she's got kids and Pete, her husband, and then something about the dog. And it says, like, he, Ted, to complete the haiku. And I thought, oh my God, I'm an English major. I read books. I'm like fascinated by language. I'm a lawyer, and this lady's got a haiku on her Facebook page.
And you recognized it straight away as a haiku. I would have just thought it's like a weird arrangement of words.
Oh, well, you give me too much credit. It literally says this is a haiku right above it, I think. So, I didn't, yeah. And I thought, oh, well, this is obviously her. Like it's too good to be true, but it can't not be, like, oh my God, we've got the same kind of sensibilities. And then I was shocked because she obviously had kids. And I had legitimately, this whole process to me is split between, like everything in life I feel like is a combination of like rational things and emotional things. And if you were like scientific about it, I think any issue or like experience that you were to approach in life would be a combination of those two. It'd be like, 60-40 one way, or, 80-20 rational, emotional, or whatever. And it feels like in this adoption story, like more so than ever, I've never really encountered anything that's 100% emotional. Like there's nothing rational about what we're doing in my mind, because there's no reason. I have no connection to these people, but I have an absolute unbreakable bond with them. And how can that be? So I had ignored a lot of really common sense realities, which are like, she might have kids.
How did you imagine her life would be, Andrew? What did you think about her life?
I guess I had just walled it off to be her.
Yeah.
I
like sitting in a house waiting for you to make contact.
Yes. That's insane, right? Like that makes no sense. But somehow I had, in my rational moments, I had thought it's obvious she may have moved on with her life. But in my reality, I hadn't really ever contemplated what that might look like. And maybe that was just because the possibilities were endless. And so a person like me could have spent years in a room just thinking about the possibilities and like not gotten anything done with the rest of my life, So maybe, hopefully, to my benefit, I had chosen to just say, I'll deal with it when we get there. And then to see twins and like smiling faces and this whole family and everything, I was just kind of like, oh my God, what, excited, very excited, but just very overwhelmed at the same time. Basically, we just went back to the adoption agency and said, like, how can we find her and this hasn't worked yet. Like I started getting quite frustrated. Like you need to find me a way that we can use just a mailed letter to the house so that I know that it got there. Because if no response comes, but I know that she got it, I'm supposed to be okay with that, But I sent her the letter via Messenger on Facebook, and we know now that never got to her because we weren't friends or she didn't have the app or whatever the situation is. So I'm thinking in my mind, if I send it and she sees it and doesn't respond, I've prepared myself to be okay with that because at least I got to say my piece. I said, thank you. I appreciate what you did. I'm well. Don't worry about things. And then I totally lied to myself because I did not accept.
It's like, I'll be so fine with that.
Yes. And then 2 minutes later, I was like, this is very unsatisfactory. So we had to follow up. And then the adoption agency. How
long from sending that? Because you didn't know she hadn't seen it.
It took another year.
You spent a year thinking she's seen it and she hasn't replied to me.
Yeah, and telling everyone that I saw and met about what had happened in some way to try to garner advice. And then eventually, I think Lisa looked me in the eye and said, you're obviously not okay with that. Mm-hmm. And that's fine. You set that rule. You don't have to be okay with that. Let's do something else. We got the births, deaths, and marriages search, which revealed her married name, which confirmed the person that we had on Facebook was in fact her. And then we went back to the adoption agency and said, stop using the maiden name. Here's her married name. And they immediately contacted the Salvation Army and got me in touch with someone at the Salvation Army who works with reuniting displaced persons. And that lady, 2 seconds later, was like, oh, I'm going to send out the letter. And, Anne has called us. And I literally melted down because I was like, where were you for the last 5 years? What? But
because it was that easy.
It was that easy.
Before you sent that email and you had confirmation, but you suspected that was her, what was it like looking at those photos of her and her kids? Did you recognize yourself? What did you think?
Yeah, especially in the boys. I mean, that's a strange experience to have never seen yourself in another family member, So that was quite surreal to kind of know just by looking, oh, these are the right people, and that strange thought kind of came to me, these are my people. It's like clannish, or it's I don't know if maybe it's even biological, or maybe it's evolutionary, I saw people that I saw myself in, and I thought, I know these people somehow, I don't know how, but I feel familiar with them, and I've never set eyes on them before. It was it was magical. It was very, very strange. And again, 0% rational, right? 100% pure emotion, just instinct, I guess, maybe emotion. And in that way, a very, very strange experience.
It was about a year from sending that email to when you and Anne met face to face, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
How did that year unfold in terms of how your relationship developed?
Pretty quickly, I think the whole, let's be kind with each other and let's be gentle kind of came down pretty quickly when, through our correspondence, we realized oh, there's no issue here. We are both all in. We want to know about each other's lives. Her family knows, her kids know, her husband knows. My family's aware. Everyone's on board. We're we don't have to stop. We can stop pretending that we're not involved in each other's lives now. So it was what do you think about this? And, you know, we're Facebook messaging in the middle of the night. Like, you know, it's just all those walls came down and it became very conversational and very, very much like a brand new friend you always knew, you know, like kind of the way probably your best friend can go away for a year or two and you come back and it's no time has passed. And then very graciously, pretty early on, Anne just shot me a message and said, I don't know what your thoughts are, but I still have contact information for Darren. What's your kind of plan there? What do you think? And I had just thought one thing at a time, you know? And so I said, no, I don't. And I didn't want to like just jump off kind of getting to know her and throw him in the mix too. Like I felt like that was kind of, it didn't seem right to not kind of honor this connection that we had made and delve into it until we got to a nice place of comfort before saying like, oh, totally, you know, let's get him involved, you know, because I had just never really thought about that. I just thought it was disrespectful somehow. So I said no. And then I started kind of living with me must be tough because then I started wandering around my house and probably like bringing him up from time to time. And then eventually Lisa's like, listen, I can tell you're thinking about him. What do you want to do? And then I'm like, oh, nothing, everything. I don't know what you're talking about. And then I realized obviously that I was thinking about Darren as well. So I took her up on the offer and she called him that day. And it's just the kind of people that they are. And then emailed me back and said, here's his information. He's ready. Like, you know, and I was just like, who are these people? Like, this is better than I could have ever imagined. It's just, they're just there. They, in a way, were just waiting. Like, how lucky, you know? No pretense, no concern, no, you know, no stress or like, they didn't come back to me like, where have you been? Like, none of that happened. They weren't like, it's, you know, it's been a long time. Why did you? They never asked me that. They were just like, I'm here. Let's do this, you know? And that was amazing. So I contacted Darren. He was coming to America to visit his wife's sister in New York in January. We were connected in June of 2018, and in January of 2019, he was going to be in the States. Well, by like November, he's like, hey, we're going to be there. We could jump in the car and come up to Rhode Island. Is that something you'd be interested in? He just lives life. He's just there, and he's like, mate, let's get together, you know? So I meet him in January, and I tell her, look, I don't want to upset you. This isn't how I saw it happening. This was you and me, you know, and now it's me and him, and I'm going to meet him first. And of course she was gracious and said, of course you meet him. It's there. Like, you're there. But I felt bad. I felt like this isn't how it was supposed to go, but whatever, you know, I mean, she just treated it like, this is life. You can't control everything, and it's all good. So, I think shortly after I met him and then kind of talked to her about that, and, you know, the whole kind of group was re-involved in the situation again. She began to get restless and say, well, we need to meet, you know? And I think that lit a fire that might otherwise not have been there. And she has a great relationship with her daughters, as you know. And I think that they were there saying probably what Lisa does for me. Mom, you're wandering around the house talking a lot about meeting him. You know, like, what do you want to do? Do you want to get together? And so they booked a trip and came here in September of 2019. And I was super grateful that I couldn't do that at that time. So they needed, you know, I couldn't take time off work and go all the way to Australia and everything. And I know that it was difficult for them. But the girls wrapped her up, bundled her up, and brought her over here. And that was amazing.
What do you remember of that day? Were you nervous?
I cheated because I met Darren first. So I had the experience already, in a way. I didn't know that at the time, but I was a mess the day I was waiting for him to show up on my doorstep and walk into my house. I didn't know what to do with myself. I was wandering around the house. I was agitated. I was irritable. I was a nightmare to be around. And I was just nervous, And because I'd had that experience, when I went to and after I met him, the sky didn't fall. I didn't have a heart attack. We got along fine. Any fear was allayed. It all worked out in the end. So I had a prior experience that Anne didn't have. And so I ran towards her, not, in every sense. I just couldn't wait to get there. I had no trepidation. I had no concern about it. Any worry or existential fear that things were going to go wrong had kind of just evaporated because I'd gone through it once before and none of those things had come true.
I saw a photo of her that the girls sent me just before you arrived, and she looked so vulnerable standing there, so nervous, and just you could see the excitement, but also just the enormity of the emotion.
Yeah, they broke the fourth wall and they sent that to me as well. Like when I was around the corner, we were walking to meet them. And that's what maybe I felt like the parent in that. So I just wanted to get there for her to stop that feeling. And it was funny because when I did meet her, she just kind of smiled and she was like, all right, it was just like, that's it. And I don't know if that's how she felt or if there's really just no other way to handle it. And then we went and got some eggs and, had brunch.
What's it like when you meet your biological mother for the first time and you're both adults?
Yeah, I think that long lost friend analogy kind of works the best. It's like someone you shouldn't know as well as you do, but you do somehow. It's much more like friends, I think, with a deferential tone. So I think we kind of we're just gentle with each other. We're just mindful of each other's processing this. We know, I think we trust that each other understands the vulnerability that this situation presents.
There's a lot going on. And I was going to say, you've come into the lives of these two big families, Anne's family and Darren's family, and they've all got to know you, but you're just one person. You've had a lot of people to get to know. You've had two new parents or parental figures, and you've had, is it 7 new siblings?
Yeah.
To get to know, plus Anne's husband, plus Darren's wife. How do you, I can't even imagine how you form all those relationships simultaneously. How do you even begin to process all of that? What's it been like?
I don't know. I really don't know. It's overwhelming, but it's been fantastic. I think that's just, it's the values with which they've approached this. This wasn't a surprise to anyone. This was an open book, and so there's been enough. I know that Darren he expressed feeling a lot of guilt over the years that he hadn't done the right thing, and I don't, that's not true. I know that he felt that way and he has every right to, but it's just not anything that he needed to worry about. And yet he hasn't hidden it. He's told everyone in his life about it. And in that way, when I show up, I was there for Christmas. He invited us to come and stay with his family for Christmas. And where, I'm there, I show up, his whole family's there. And again, it's like, no one's standoffish. Everyone's just, hey, this is it.
Well, it's like you're a lovely gift for everyone. That's how I've heard you described. It's like we've all got this new gift.
For sure. You can say that. I'm not going to say that about myself.
Well, they've all said that about you to me. They all feel like they've been given this incredible gift. And it's I imagine with siblings, it's much more simple because it's just like, I don't want to project anything onto you, but it seems like you've just joined this big tribe and you're just kind of one of the kids now.
Yeah. And I think that it's my obligation to fit into their world. Because
what do you mean by that?
So it was like Jessie and Clare are just like, oh my God, who are you? How are you? Do you sleep late? Do you get up early? Like they want to know everything, little detail. Here's my dog. Do you have a dog? Oh, that dog's cute. And they just dive in. And it's like, that makes it, they're just open books. And that makes it easier, right? So they want to know. They want to kind of like wrap me into the fold. And in that way, I feel so welcome, and then we can just talk shit to each other about whatever it is that's going on, and we can relate, and that's great. With their brothers, they're very quiet, they're very much their own set. They take each other's counsel, and so I had emailed them and I got responses back and we were having a chat and I could feel this just difference to the way that they approached it. And that's an amazing experience. We're all different, like we're all unique in that way. And so when we went out to Australia and, everyone was together and I could see we weren't getting that connection kind of thing in a big group. And then the night kind of peeled off and everyone went to bed and all that. And then the three of us are left there. And we have this couple hours chat about nothing, right? Just stuff and, getting to know each other. And if they, it got a little bit real talk questions and stuff. And they talk to each other while I'm sitting there, which is a weird experience for someone who's not part of twins, It's really like, wow, they're thinking out loud. And it was a much, much different process that they went through than Jessie and Clare. And so I thought I need to be a part of that in the way that they want it to go, like it's not going to be the same across the board. And then in Darren's family, his wife's Italian, couple of sisters, it's all noise and excitement. And it's all, not to say they didn't value me, but they hug the mailman. You know what I mean? Like everyone is a part of their family. Everyone's got big hearts.
Yeah.
So there was room for me there.
Yeah.
And all I had to do, and Lisa, which is just my long-suffering wife who has to meet all of these people she knows nothing about. But all that was asked of us was that we roll with it.
Yeah.
Show up. So I just try to approach it in the way that the other person needs it to be approached. And I don't know how that is. I can only just try to intuit from the way that we're interacting. And if they're not super engaged, I'm not chasing them, but I'm here. If they're super engaged, I'm an open book, like, you want answers, you've got questions, like we'll talk, like what, so whichever way it works for them, I'm just grateful that they're interested in including me at all. That is not in the infinite ways that this could have worked out. That's probably the best way that the way that it did is probably the best way that it could. And I'm cognizant that there could have been an infinite amount of ways that this went, so many of which could have been bad, could have been more difficult, and required all these years of good choices by these people who had no obligation to make these choices, to be ready to open their lives to a stranger, all these years later. So, and then I've got my family to fall back on, and talk to them about it. And include them in something that's so integral to my life. And that's wonderful, so I couldn't be luckier.
I wanted to interview Andrew and Anne separately because I thought they'd be more likely to open up when they weren't in front of each other. But what I found to be just uncanny about speaking to them, just a few hours apart, is how they both put each other at the centre of the story. They were both so focused on making it easier for one another, not just in the retelling of the story, but in every decision they made all the way through. Anne always put Andrew's feelings and his mum and dad, his adopted parents, their feelings and his life ahead of her own desires and wants, ever since she gave him up, I suppose. And Andrew paid her the same courtesy without even having ever met her. And way before he found her, he was just very conscious of wanting her to be proud of him and not wanting to upturn her life. They were both just so sensitive about the many, many others in Andrew's biological families and his adopted family, because there were dozens of them. New siblings, new aunts, new uncles, new step-parents. It's such a big, complicated, beautiful family. I hope you enjoyed this story. For anyone who's been affected by feelings of loss or of longing after listening to Andrew and Anne's beautiful story, please know that you're not alone. You can call Lifeline on 13 11 14 or Beyond Blue on 1300 22 4636. It's a hard time at the moment, so please don't hesitate to reach out. Until we meet again, stay safe, wash your hands, love your family, and don't forget to check in with your friends. Lots of love.